Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? Is it on? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? If you can hear me in the chat, say hello. Say hello. Hello. My name is ProfRich, and I don't know if anyone can hear me. Do you know what it's like to just talk to yourself and be like, is this thing on? Can anyone hear me? What the? I'm still waiting. Oh, we can hear and see you. Hello, everybody. My name is ProfRich. If you found this channel, then you have found the best damn English learning channel on the internet. That's right. Congratulations. You have done it. Here we are, folks. We're gonna learn some English, and this is the best bloody place to learn it. So, smash that like button if you have found this channel by YouTube search, because that lets YouTube know that this is the best damn channel where you can learn English. My name is ProfRich. I've been teaching English for 17 years, and I love it. And I challenge anyone out there with another English channel to a battle of the teachers. And you will lose, because this is the best damn place to learn English. Today, we're going to talk about language for logic. And everything which I just said, I also said 10 minutes ago, because I thought I was live, but I wasn't. So here we go. No, Pallavi, damn is not a rude word. Unless you're very, very conservative. So we're talking about logic today, folks. We are going to discuss logic. We're going to learn logic verbs, that is, verbs and vocabulary related to logic. And this topic is really useful if you're going to study at university. Because when you go to university, you need to make arguments. And when I say arguments, I mean academic arguments, not a fight, but academic arguments. And academic arguments are rational, logical arguments which we use to establish science and so on. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to learn a basic argument form, and then we are going to practice. Without further ado, let us move on. I want to know which of these arguments are bad arguments. So take a look. We have 4 arguments. Donk, 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 donk. 4 arguments. And I want you to type in the chat, or if you're watching this video later, type in the comments down below which of these arguments are bad arguments, and you must say why. Which of these arguments are bad arguments, and you must say why. What does it mean, teacher? What does what mean, Pallavi? You need to be specific. Ashley Chen says, today sounds a bit different. I'm trying the radio voice. Ashley, what do you think? I'll do a vote a bit later to see if we prefer the radio in-your-face voice. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Sleepwalker's just like false, false, true, false. I want to know which is a bad argument, and if so, why? Shimi has an interesting thing to say. Shimi says, it's light outside, so the sun is up. That's not right, because everyone knows the sun is going to be there outside. I'm a bit confused. The question, Pallavi, is which of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4, is a bad argument? When I say argument, I mean an academic argument. I mean an argument like you make an argument at university. This is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean a fight. This, in fact, is a positive thing. It's an academic argument. And I would like to introduce you all to a lovely, lovely gift that I received from some wonderful students. Which is this lovely cup. And it's a picture of my cats, Ginger and Pepper. And at the top it says, "We are watching you." So smash that like button if that's cool. Which, yes, it is. It is very cool. Thank you so much for that. 15 seconds to go, folks. Which of these are a bad argument and why? And then I'm going to tell you. Oh, that's a great answer from the person with a Russian name. Dimitri. Hello, Dimitri. Thank you, Dimitri. That is fantastic. Oh, yes, we're getting some good things in the chat now. Well done, Sleepwalker. You're getting the idea. So, let's have a look at the first one. If it's light outside, the sun is up. So with this, we have an implied premise. A premise is the base of an argument. We make premises, and from our premises, we make a conclusion. So we have an implied premise here, and the implied premise is, if it's light outside, then the sun is up. This is the implied premise. Now, we have a question here, which is, do we accept this implied premise? If it is light outside, then the sun is up. Is this premise true? In fact, this premise is not true, as Sleepwalker suggested in the chat. Also, I think Shimi wanted to suggest the same thing. It's a bad argument. The premise isn't true because it could be light outside, but maybe it's because of a street light or someone with a torch or a fire or the moon. So it doesn't mean that the sun is up just because it's light outside. So here, this is a bad argument because the premise is not true. We can actually call this an unsound argument. All right, let's move on to the next one. If there is a cat noise, then there is a cat. I heard meow, so there is a cat. This is also a bad argument. This is also a bad argument. And the issue here really comes with there is versus I think I heard. There is versus I think I heard. We could also talk about a cat noise versus meow. We have to say that if there is a cat noise, as in a true noise made by a cat, then yes, there is a cat. That seems true to me. And I think I heard meow is also true. However, we cannot conclude that there is a cat because I think I heard is not the same as there is. Oh, I think I heard rain. That's different than saying there is rain. Right? So we're not sure, we can't be certain. Also, I said I heard meow. But meow is not necessarily a cat noise. Maybe my friend Rob said meow. And I thought it was a cat noise. Right? So we can see there's some problems with this argument. The problem with this argument is the conclusions do not result from the premises, which means this is an invalid argument. Invalid. We say this is an invalid argument. This is illogical, Captain. It actually means it's illogical. All right. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3 says, if I can see, then I am alive. I can see, therefore, I am alive. If I can see, then I'm alive. I can see, therefore, I am alive. So, premise 1, premise 2, and then our conclusion. Premise A. Do we accept premise A? If I can see, then I'm alive. That seems true, right? Because if you're dead, you can't see, not with human eyes anyway. So I think we can accept this. I can see. Well, can you? I can. So yes, I accept that. Therefore, I am alive. Yes. So this is a sound argument and a valid argument. A sound argument because it is, the conclusion is true, and a valid argument because it is logical. All right. So that's our good argument, number 3. That takes us to number 4. That cake smells great, so I must be hungry. Well, that cake smells great. We can accept that maybe that's true. Let's imagine it's true. Yes. And then we have a conclusion. I am hungry. Okay. But there's an implied premise, as with before. An implied premise. We have the implied premise. If I smell a cake and it smells great, then I am hungry. That is our implied premise. Is that true? Well, for me, that is not true. I can smell a cake and it can smell great, but maybe I'm full. That's possible, right? So this is not true, which means, once again, this is an invalid argument. The premises do not lead to the conclusion. It is illogical. All right, so that's an introduction to today. That's the kind of thing that we're going to be looking at. We are going to look in a bit more detail, and we're going to look at some of the language involved here. Sirajani says, I'm lost. Don't worry, Sirajani. I'm here. We're going back to basics. Let's have a look at some language related to logic. So here we have 6 terms that relate to logic. The terms are form basic principles, hypothesize, observe, imply, infer, and deduce. These are all verbs. Down below, we have the definitions, the meaning of those verbs. I want you to match the meaning to the verbs. And for this, you have a lovely 2.5 minutes. And I'll read for you the definitions there. A. Note something that you experience. B. Suppose that something is true by reasoning or thinking or being rational. C. Arrive at a fact by reasoning. So notice the difference with B and C. B says, suppose that something is true. We might also call this guess or imagine. And then we've got arrive at a fact. So the difference being between suppose or guess and arrive at a fact. Then D, when one thing is true, it means another thing is true. E, create a foundation like a base of a theory. And F is create a belief, although you're not certain of it yet. All right, so what do you think about these answers in the chat? And while you guys do that, I want to have a little vote. So you may notice today that I'm using a volume compressor and expander on the audio in order to make the audio sound a bit more professional. Do you prefer the audio today? Do you prefer the audio today? That is the sound of my voice. Do you prefer it today? Yes or no? This is the kind of sound which is used in radio and podcasts and so on normally. And if you like it, then I'll use it going forward. Manuel says, yes, your voice is better than mine. Manuel, I don't mean that. I'm not talking about do you like my voice. I mean, do you prefer how the sound is today? And we have overwhelmingly people are saying yes. So that's that. Plavi says that's difficult. Try it, Plavi. I'm going to give you the answers in 10 seconds. You've got 10 more seconds to get those answers in. And if you're just joining us from YouTube, hello, my name is ProfRich, and we are learning English related to logical arguments. Alrighty, let's go into this. So, number one, form basic principles is create a foundation or base of a theory. Create a foundation or base of a theory. 2, hypothesize, which means create a belief, although you're not certain of it yet. I don't like the word create here, so we're going to say create a belief. Imagine a belief is true. Yes. So not create a belief. It's better to say imagine a belief is true, although you're not certain of it yet. We know, of course, that we often use hypothetical or hypothesize in English teaching to talk about the second and third conditional. And then we have observe. Observe, which is, of course, note something that you experience. And I think that the letters are being changed there, so don't pay attention to the letters. And then number 4, imply, which is when one thing is true, it means another thing is true. Infer, which is suppose that something is true, or guess or imagine that something is true by reasoning. That's an inference. And then we have deduce, which is arrive at a fact by reasoning. So you can see that a lot of these terms are related to each other. And we can also see, for example, with infer and deduce, that deduce is basically the same thing as infer. However, deduce has more certainty. We arrive at a fact with reasoning, whereas with infer, we suppose something is true. We still use reasoning to make our inference. So both deduction and inference use rationality and reasoning. All right. Let's move on. So now we have our verbs and meaning, but this time I would like you to match the examples. And I'll have to move myself out of the way there. I'd like you to match the examples here. And for this, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So we have the verb and the meaning, and I want an example for each of them. I'll read those examples in just a moment. Pallavi says, you're too loud. Do you know you have a volume control, Pallavi? You can turn it down if it's too loud. Well, Manuel, that's not true, is it? Not all conclusions are biased. For example, how about this, Manuel? How about this? All triangles have 3 sides. This thing has, or all triangles have 3 and only 3 sides. This thing has 3 sides, therefore it is a triangle. Can we truly say that this is bias? Renit says, this lesson seems too difficult for me. Stay with it, Renit. We're going to do some easier stuff as well. Also, I am going to teach you this. I will teach you the answers and we'll talk about what it means. It's very useful for anyone who's going to university, especially people who are going to study science, law, or philosophy. So, I'll show you the answers for this one. Here are the answers. And move myself out of the way. And if you're using the letters, then that is 1F, 2A, 3C, 4D, 5B, and, sorry, not 5B, 5E, and 6B. So there's the letters, and there's our complete table. There is our complete table. I understand that it is a little tricky. That's because these verbs are all related. If we want to give them some simple synonyms, then we could say simple synonyms. Principles are base beliefs. Hypothesize or the noun hypotheses. Hypothesize means imagine something is true without proof or without certain proof. Okay, we could also say that it's like propose a theory. Observe means experience or see, basically. Imply means something logically leads to something else, right? So, I'm drinking coffee. I enjoy it. Therefore, I am a person who enjoys coffee. Right? I am drinking coffee. I enjoy it. That implies I am a person who enjoys coffee. All right? Infer, which means something indicates something else is true, but it's not as strong as logical certainty. We could also say that infer is a bit like guess. And then deduce, which means we discover truth by using reason. That is deduction. All right? Now we're going to practice the different forms of this vocabulary. So I'm going to show you a lovely, lovely table, and I want you to try and write the other forms of these verbs in the chat. So this is a word formation activity, and as I've mentioned in the past, this kind of activity is very useful for getting used to the prefixes and suffixes in English and starting to understand what those prefixes and suffixes mean. For this, I'll give you 2.5 minutes. Anamat says that deduce is more focused on logical reasoning and evidence, while infer is more about interpreting implicit information. That's quite interesting, Anamat. What are you studying, Pallavi? Ashley Chen is starting us off by saying observation. Nice. That is correct. Observation is the noun for observe. I am being a barbarian today. I apologize. I'm drinking coffee with protein powder in it, and it's really a little bit uncouth. English literature. Well, you need to make arguments in English literature, Pallavi. For example, the author the author's female characters don't have a lot of depth. If someone writes a book where the female characters don't have a lot of depth, this implies that they don't really understand women. Therefore, the author doesn't understand women. There's an interesting argument to make in a literary critique. It's always good to brush up on your logic. Don't you need to analyze the literature, though, Pallavi? It's not just about studying the history of literature. Is it not also about forming an opinion and arguing about the representation of the literature? It's not just about studying facts, but it's about making a critique, is it not? All right, some great answers coming in, and I'm going to give you those answers right now. So, here's your answers. And of course, some of these are more common than others. So, I'm going to highlight in this table the most common forms that we would use. So, hypothetical, we use that all the time. We do use it as a noun as well. Hypothesis we also use, and hypothetically is a very useful adverb. Observation, yes. Oh, by the way, of course, we use the verbs all the time, so we can make all those bold. Observational and observationally, not really that common. Implication, yes, we use that all the time. Implicit, yes, as well as implicated. And implicitly is also used quite a lot. Inference is used quite a lot. Not the others, though. And deduction, yes, but not really the others. So you have there in the table the most commonly used words from these word forms. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about a basic argument form. And if you ever study logic at university, then this is one of the first basic things that you will learn about logic. It has quite a strange name because it's a Latin name. So don't worry if the name scares you a little bit. The name is modus ponens. Do you know what modus ponens is? So modus ponens is a very simple logical argument. And you can see that argument expressed on the screen there. Modus ponens. P implies Q. P is true. Therefore, Q is true. We use P and Q to represent statements. And we can put any statement we want into this structure or argument. And we know, if we do that, that it is a logical argument. And if the premises are true, then we know it is a sound and correct argument. So it's a good argument. So we know that anything that we put in here will be logical. And if it is true, then it will also be a good argument. There are many argument forms like this, but modus ponens is the most basic. And it's the first one you will learn in any kind of logical course. So, let's consider an argument from me about my cats. My cats haven't eaten for 6 hours. Now, I know if my cats haven't eaten for 6 hours, that means they must be hungry now. I know that. So I want to put this into a modus ponens format. So P becomes my cats haven't eaten for 6 hours. And Q becomes, my cats are hungry now. And then this reads, my cats haven't eaten for 6 hours implies my cats are hungry now. It is true that my cats haven't eaten for 6 hours. Therefore, my cats are hungry now. And there you have that argument on your screen. That's a nice modus ponens basic argument. Does anyone have any questions about that in the chat? So let me show you another argument. I've been awake for 2 hours and I haven't had a coffee yet. Implies I want my first coffee of the day. I've been awake for 2 hours and I haven't had a coffee yet. That's true. It's not true, actually. It's false. But if it was true, therefore, I want my first coffee of the day. Does it look good to you? Is this a good argument? Let's consider another one and think about whether that's a good argument. I am hot implies I am thirsty. I am hot. Therefore, I am thirsty. What do you think about this? Why is this a bad argument? We can very clearly see that because we've put it into modus ponens format. So what is the problem here? Pallavi, what's the problem with this argument? Can you tell me? What's the problem with it? There is a problem, but where is the problem? It is valid, or it is logical. But what is the problem? I am thirsty can be false. Yes, it can, sleepwalker. And that is the problem with the conclusion. But what about the premises? What is the problem with the premises? So Kamal has mentioned a rhetorical problem that I'm hot is about the temperature of my body. Hot could mean you eat spicy food. Right. The problem is premise one. This is not true. I am hot does not imply I am thirsty. So we cannot make this conclusion. It's unsound because the premises are not true. All right. So that's a little bit of practice of modus ponens. Let's finish off our English for today. Use a language for today to complete the text And I'd like you to type your answers in the chat. So what can you remember from the language from today? Look at that text and complete it. Excuse me. Complete it using the vocabulary that we looked at today. And for this, I will give you about 5 minutes. No, 3 minutes. Each of the underscores represents a word from today. So type those answers in the chat. And you can, of course, download the notes from today. The link to do that is in the chat right now. You can download all the notes from today. And you have about 1 minute left. I know what it says. I thought I was logical until today. Could watch it again, Anawat. By the way, we haven't finished our little section on modal verbs that we've been doing. I am going to do a little bit more on that. We haven't yet considered criticism. And we also need to talk about the third conditional. So we will be doing a little bit more on modal verbs later on. And I do actually take requests. If you'd like to make a request for a future class, then post a comment down below the video. I read every single comment and I reply to every single comment. All right, so here come your answers, folks. Right, number 1 is rational or reasonable. Number 2, principles or ideas. But ideas doesn't begin with a P. Number 3, deductions. Number 4, implications. Number 5, infer. Number 6, infer. Number 7, hypothesis. A hypothesis. The plural is hypotheses. And number 8 is theory. And there's our answers on the screen. So that does conclude the new English that we've learned today. We now have a bit of time for question time. If you would like to ask a question about anything today or just about English in general, then you can type that in the chat right now and I will get to that. First, before that, so feel free to type your questions in the chat. But before that, we are going to look at the homework. We're going to start with Julia Hutar. And the homework was a writing. I'm going to read it for you. So here's Julia's writing. Julia says, well, who the heck am I? It's quite a confrontational or quite a challenging way to start there, Julia, with who the heck am I? Maybe a little bit colloquial. I'm not only a bibliophile, but also a passionate English learner. I'm also one of ProfRich's active students, and he is a prolific hell of a teacher. Interesting. So we got hell of a, which is US slang. We're going to put that at the start and say he is a hell of a. It is actually hell of a prolific teacher. He's a hell of a prolific teacher, which means he produces a lot. Let me unfold a story. I don't know about unfolding a story. Not sure about that, Julia. Let's say, let me reveal is better. Let me reveal a story about something that should have happened. Nice, modal verbs. Should have happened. Should have happened. Let me reveal a story about something that should have happened, but it didn't pan out as planned. Pan out means result in as a verb. So it didn't result as planned. It didn't pan out as planned. I set my 7-day challenge for studying English at 3 hours minimum a day. Later, I found it looming over me. And then she says, setting made in a short burst of excitement. I'm confused by that part, so let's remove that. Technically speaking, I have failed to launch my intensive learning aspiration by account of a plethora of temptations and disruptions. That's brilliant, Julia. I'm going to read that again. Technically speaking, I have failed to launch my intensive learning aspiration by account of a plethora of temptations and disruptions. Let me juxtapose between the temptations. During my target period, I wore busy as a badge of honor. However, I failed to resist the temptation of doom scrolling, infomania, and FOMO. FOMO is fear of missing out. Amidst the information-loaded word, with a hyphen, Julia, information-loaded world, which is brimming with a mix of misinformation and disinformation. I'm not so sure about that. I think everything technically is misinformation and disinformation. Everything in the world. It's just about how much it is and our perspective and opinion. Julia continues, besides, I listened to music for the purpose of entertainment and a short-lived euphoria of excitement that disrupted my motivations. That sounds too much like poetry, Julia. I think you need to take the language down a little. I'll read that again. I listened to music with the purpose of entertainment and a short-lived euphoria of excitement that disrupted my motivations. Sounds almost like Edgar Allan Poe. In addition, I was stuck in a mind pit, such as a knowing doing trap and resting on my laurels. We don't need to say past laurels because rest on one's laurels means the past. However, I learnt for 1 hour every day instead and went through the motions of intensive learning. Come what may, that would have not been triggered a pang of regret. Sorry, I don't understand that, Julia. Come what may is good, and then that would not have been triggered a pang of regret. No, something's wrong there. Looking on the bright side, slow and steady, win the race. That's good. Looking on the bright side, slow and steady, win the race. Correct. In a nutshell, I welcome, not I am welcome. I welcome your constructive feedback, folks, if you want to weigh in on my homework. Cheers. Okay, so I just want to point out, Julia, that if you use language like a short-lived euphoria of excitement that disrupted my motivations, then it sounds kind of strange to finish with cheers, folks. So I think that we're having a problem of style here, that you're coming in with very colloquial language, but also very formal language and putting them together. And it's very good language, but the style is inconsistent. So I think for your next homework, you should decide, am I going to be informal? And your informal would be, who the heck am I? Hell of a teacher. Cheers, folks. That's informal. Or formal, which would be bibliophile, plethora of temptations, and a short-lived euphoria. They are formal expressions. Okay, so think a bit about style. All right, thank you very much, Julia. Now we move on to Neo. This is the first homework that Neo has ever submitted. Neo says, the joy of ignorance occurs to me more than often. This joy came as an epiphany, a sweet Himalayan breeze, and after a while, when often I participated in the conversations with another. Epiphany, which read as that, it was a very close call. This is poetry. Why is everyone writing poetry? I didn't say to write a poem, but all right. Epiphany, which read as that, it was a very close call, and somehow you had succeeded. You had to succeed to avoid saying what you had thought once before, which would be totally awkward and kind of insulting. Preventing yourself to mourn now. I'm finding that a little bit difficult to understand. It does make grammatical sense, though. Freshly, I had found myself going wild with anger at my parents. The anger which was totally absurd in reality, but which I was blind to see. So anyway, I just somehow didn't express those nonsense words and slung away those stinky garbages of anger into my parents' face before I realized the reality that it was absurd and wrong. And now I feel so fortunate in finding myself dancing in that sweet breeze. Seems like, as with Luke Skywalker, the Force was with me. This is very interesting, Neo. I'm very. There's definitely some poetry going on here, and kind of an interesting story too. So thank you for that. My advice for you next time is, can we take it a bit more down to earth? Let's have some down to earth writing. Are we going to continue with this stuff? Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure that was Neo. Was that Neo? Yes, it was. It was. Okay. Because I also got an email of someone else, and it turns out that person is actually Neo. That's what their name is. Yeah. Okay, great. Right, and then we got Vladimir. Let's see. Hello, teacher. What don't I have done which I wish I would have? I'll say that again. What don't I have done which I wish I would have? Great. My practices of information searching on the web has always been multiple page tabs. Tabs make it able to be reshuffled or split into separate windows, which are the main internet friction? What do you mean by friction? A few PC coolers and power blocks I used were damaged because of overloading performance. About 3 years ago, I used a different browser daily to click on pop-up ads. Several years ago, I read an article about that 9 browser tabs are the controllable limit. At that time, the most active advertising systems users' browser tabs count was 50. I'm lost now. I'm lost, Vladimir. I tried to use browser extensions such as OneTab or TabTab. In the present days, I've read about vertical tabs extension and freeing my memory of unused tabs. I used to open more than 50 tabs. I'm struggling to keep browser tabs closed. I dare not use more than 9 tabs daily. Okay. I've got a headache. All right, I think what you're talking about there is that you have a habit of opening lots of browser tabs and you want to somehow control this habit. Did you know that you can group tabs? You can put tabs into groups, which can help a little bit. Another thing to do is that you can do a bookmark all and then bookmark all your tabs into one folder and then just close that window and start again. And if you're really worried about forgetting or missing something from another tab, then you just go back to that bookmark folder where you've bookmarked and saved everything. But yes, it sounds like Vladimir is struggling with a tab addiction. All right, folks, I think it's time for me to move on to the homework for next week. And the deadline, of course, will be Saturday, the 2nd of March. The deadline is March 2nd. It's going to be a simple one. Maybe not that simple. I'm going to specify use simple English. I'm going to say using simple but fluent English. All right, so that is going to be your homework for next week. Simply prepare a simple modus ponens argument. And if you can't remember what modus ponens is, then take a look at the material from today. Base it on something in your life. Record yourself speaking about this. Don't use a script, just speak naturally. And then send it to me on our Discord server, which is bit.ly/englearnchat. So let's see what questions that we have for today. All right, first question is from Anawat. And Anawat says, in your humble opinion, how can you say that a person is logical? You can't. People aren't logical. All right, next question. What does covet mean? Oh. Shimmy. Covet means want. That's it, really. Desire. That's covet. Covet, it's an old word which is famous because of the KJV version of the Bible. The KJV version of the Bible is the traditional version. It's no longer used in a lot of churches. If you are Christian, you will know that probably the NIV is the preferred version in a lot of Anglican churches now. That's the new international version. But the KJV version, the King James version, it does have some interesting impact. Like, I remember one person pointing out that in the King James version, you often get the word behold. And that is just a fantastic word. Let me represent what that word means by going full screen. Behold, it is I, ProfRich. That's behold. So it's a great word, and you get that word a lot in the KJV, but in the NIV you don't get it so much. So I think, it's nice to compare original translations and later translations and newer translations in order to get a better sense of the meaning of something. Right then, next question. Sleepwalker says, what's the difference between capacity and capability? Okay, so capability sounds active. As in, like, it's something that it can do. Like, a computer has the capability to store information. But capacity sounds more like a passive ability. And it's also used to express containment limits. So, for example, wood has the capacity to burn. And my cup has a capacity to hold, or has a capacity of 450 milliliters of liquid. Something like that. Sorry, Neo, what was that question? I did actually review your homework. Did you want me to, what did you want? Do you want me to show you it with some corrections? The problem is, if I do this now for you, then everyone's going to want it. All right, so this is Neo's homework. Yeah, so there is a similar issue to what we had with Julia's homework a little bit, that it's too poetic. I didn't really require something this poetic. I just wanted some natural writing. The joy of ignorance, it sounds like a very interesting concept, but it's quite high intellectual to talk about things like the joy of ignorance, you know? And how about we bring that down to earth a little bit, for example? So rather than the joy of ignorance, say, you know, I often indulge in a bit of ignorance. That is, I kind of like it sometimes when I don't actually know something. You might think of it like taking the blue pill in the Matrix. Right, so then you move on, you say, this joy came as an epiphany, a sweet Himalayan breeze. After a while, we often participated in conversations with one another. It's very, very beautiful, very poetic, very intellectual. But let's take it down a little. And let's say, I once had an epiphany. Epiphany's all right. Notice we can use this fancy language, but sparingly, not too much. So, I had an epiphany. I once had an epiphany about this. It came to me while I was arguing with my parents. Notice I'm bringing it down to earth, right? We're not staying in the clouds too much. I love writing like we're in the clouds, you know? It's great. It's wonderful. It's poetic. It's philosophical. But I think for this particular activity, which was supposed to be about using modal verbs in a natural way, I think we need a bit more down to earth. So that's generally my comments about yours, Neo. And if you missed it, I did actually talk about it before in the stream. Pachu says, sir, can you take classes of a summary of the Bible? I want to learn languages. What do you mean, Pachu? Because I'm a bit confused there. Like, you've said you want to take classes of a summary of the Bible, and then you've said, I want to learn languages. Do you want to learn about the Bible? Or do you want to learn language from the Bible? I think I need to do a vote on that. The thing about this, Pachu, is I haven't yet put a lot of religion into my teaching, and I'm not sure if that is a route which I wish to go down. As a teacher, I often try to keep my personal opinion and perspective separate from my language teaching. So although I am happy to offer my perspective and opinion, I don't want to present things as language teaching when they have secret opinions hiding within them. However, I would actually really enjoy and be very interested in talking a bit about the Bible. I would just have to be very careful in how I did that. So let's do a little poll here. Would you like a class on the Bible? Let's see. We'll see how controversial it is. Neo, don't try to influence the vote. Just let people vote. All right. There was another question, was there not? From Dan. Okay. Whew, I wish I had some more coffee, Dan. just to brace myself for your question, because they tend to be quite challenging. Are the following possible to be changed into passive infinitives? It's a good place to visit. I have a car to sell. Are these berries good to eat? It's a good place to visit. Very interesting. I have a car to sell. I have a car to sell. It's a good place to visit. Are these berries good to eat? Yes. Interesting. I knew it, Dan. As soon as I see your name, I just know this one is going to get into my brain. Nice question. All right, let's talk about it. The more natural form would definitely be like that in what we've referred to here as the active infinitive. And when Dan says the infinitive, he is actually talking about the to infinitive here, where we've said to visit. And we might call that the standard infinitive or the active infinitive. Now, let's talk about the meaning of that. What is the meaning of to visit here? The meaning of to visit actually is for the purpose of visiting. So what we're saying here is it is a good place. Why is it a good place? Oh, it's a good place for the purpose of visiting. All right? Now, if we say it's a good place to be visited, there's actually a different meaning there. If we say it's a good place to be visited, that's our passive infinitive. That means it is a good place. Why is it a good place? It's a good place for the purpose of being visited. And that sounds like it means it's good to go there if you want to be visited. Now, what does be visited mean here? It's a little bit tricky to say. You could mean be visited by friends, but actually it sounds a bit like you're saying be visited by ghosts or something, you know? Like if you want a visitation, then it's a good place to go, right? So it sounds like when you say be visited, you're actually talking about you being visited by someone or something. All right? So that's that one. Now, I don't think they're all the same as this, because this one actually rests upon this adjective of good. It's one of the important things about this statement, that it has that adjective. Let's have a look at the others. He says, I have a car to sell. I have a car to sell. So, I have a car. this car is for the purpose of selling. Okay, that seems all right, doesn't it? Yeah, I can see our problem here. When we say, I have a car to be sold, this is ambiguous. This could be interpreted two ways. One, I have a car so I can be sold. Or two, I have a car so that it can be sold. So we could actually interpret it as the second one, but it is possible that we also mean the first one, which might seem a bit weird, but it is possible. How about this? How about we say, this car has leather seats to be sold. So we could say, why does this car have leather seats? For the purpose of being sold, as in the car being sold. Or, why does this car have leather seats? Well, the leather seats are to be sold. So again, we've got a bit of ambiguity here. And actually, if we say this car has leather seats to sell, that sounds a bit weird too, because it sounds like the car is selling the seats. All right. And let's go to his last one. His last one says, are these berries good to eat? Right, yeah. So we have the similar thing with this one. I think you can guess it by this point. Are these berries good to eat? Great. That would just mean what we think it means. That are these berries good for the purpose of eating them? Right? Whereas, are these berries good to be eaten? Has the ambiguity. Are these berries good for being eaten? The berries, that is. Or, are these berries good for me to be eaten? Me being eaten. So, a bit of ambiguity there. So I hope that helps you understand that a bit more, Dan. The short answer is yes, they are possible. However, the long answer is the meaning gets a little bit interesting. I'm quite interested in how much positivity there was about a class in the Bible. It's still obviously controversial. That is definitely a controversial vote. 57% say yes and 42% say no. On the other hand, you certainly don't have to watch it. So, it's on my radar, folks. It is on my radar. I shall have to talk to my vicar to ask what his perspective is. All right. All right, fine. It's on my radar, and I will try to approach the subject purely as a language teacher. I understand you say it would be a mistake, Manuel. I get that. And I do welcome all perspectives, of course. And I know, of course, that there are many different religions in the chat. I know that. I know that we have some Buddhists. I know that we have some Muslims. I know that we have some Christians. And I know that we have some atheists. I think we have some Hindus. And I think we have at least one pagan. What's a vicar? A vicar is the name of a priest for the Protestant church. And that is, of course, something that we would have to talk about in the class. What is a vicar? What is a priest? What's the Protestant church? What is the Catholic church? There's lots of different things. No, Pallavi, I'm considering it, but it's just a question of how I do it. Like, for example, one possibility is that I open up a new channel. So a special channel where people can go if they want to learn a bit about that. Another possibility is that I do a live stream, but that it's private. So you just get to watch it. And if you have the link, you can view it, but it doesn't appear on the channel. There's a few different ways that we can do it. I definitely would like to do it in a way that it doesn't annoy or irritate anyone who doesn't want to hear about religious perspective. Like, for example, Manuel has made it clear that he's not particularly favorable towards the idea. I understand that. Spain has a difficult relationship with Christianity. And of course, we must accept that terrible things have been done in the name of Christianity, in the name of Islam, in the name of Hinduism, in the name of Buddhism, even. Terrible things have been done in the name of those things because, of course, humans sometimes do terrible things and they will use all kinds of ways to justify those terrible things. All right, everybody. So, thank you very much for joining me today. My name has been Professor Rich. And of course, I wish you all a lovely, lovely day. If you haven't already, then smash the like button. And make sure that you check out the link down below the video to join our Discord server. And of course, I will catch ya later. See you later, folks. Have a lovely, 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 lovely week and a lovely weekend. Thank you all. Thank you. Goodbye. See you next time.